And so the title of the talk is Kinship with All Life. And basically it's a talk about the nature of oneness, what keeps us from that nature, and how we get back to that nature. And the first thing I want to start off with is a quote from one of Ernest Holmes' books called 365 Science of Mind, titled, All Life is One. He says, just as every physical substance known derives from one universal energy, so there is but one life principle, which is God, in which we live from, an infinite source, and we live out our individual lives from which they are born. And so what he says here is that all life is whole, or implies that all life is whole, and that this wholeness takes place whether we're conscious of it or unconscious of it. So conscious wholeness clearly means that this is a sense that we know that we're connected. When it's unconscious wholeness, we're connected, we just don't know that we're connected. So we do things as if we're separate from one person or another, just because we're not aware of our oneness, but the oneness is there. And that oneness brings a problem for most of us, because if it's one whole thing, that means there's a front and there's a back. There's a light and there's a dark, there's a good and there's a bad, and psychologically it means there's a shadow and there's a persona. It's all whole, it's all one, it's all good, and it's all bad, and it's all mushed together. And that does create some problems for us and causes us to be separate from the one, but it's also a way that we can get back to the one. So most of us, as it turns out, we want to avoid the bad stuff. We want to avoid pain. We want to avoid anything that's difficult. And I was listening to someone once, I said, that's right, we've all heard that it only takes a little bit of bad stuff to undo a whole bunch of good stuff. And it's like one explosion can tear down months and months or years of building. And as it turns out, that if we have to make a choice between 6 hours of the best joy and the best goodness we can have, or 6 minutes of pain, we're going to choose to avoid 6 minutes of pain rather than have 6 hours of really good joy. It's just one of those things about human nature that we'll go out of our way to avoid pain and to avoid the things that we have to integrate to make ourselves one. That's just the way we are. And so it raises the question of, well, since this bad stuff is out there, and we all know it's out there, why do bad things happen to good people? Because most of us like to think we're good people. Why does bad stuff happen? And there's a few different answers I want to give to this. But the first one comes from a writer from a ways back. She doesn't write anymore, called Dear Abby. And she tells this story in her little column. And the story goes as follows. This woman writes in and says, Dear Abby, I don't invite men over to my house after one date. It's not something I do. But I was at a play. And it was raining really hard. And this fellow needed a ride. And we really had a good conversation, a good time. So I gave him a ride and invited him home. And we had a good night. And I was living on cloud 9. And the man never called. I could never reach him. And I'm just heartbroken. I don't know what to do. Dear Abby, what's your advice? Her advice was, pray for more rain. Pray for more rain. Embrace the shadow. The rainbow only comes after the storm. So that's to embrace the bad stuff if you want to really be a good person. And this comes out in our teaching in what is one of the parables called Weeds Growing in the Wheat. It's not exactly titled that, but basically it was pointed out that this wheat was growing, but it had all these thorns and thistles and wheat growing up with it. And they said, what do we do about this? He says, don't worry, just let them grow together. We'll separate them at harvest time. So weeds and wheat, good and bad, grow up together, but it's separated at the end. So we just live in a world where we have to kind of deal with that. And eventually we get to separate it in the end. And as it turns out, this is something Reverend Carolyn says, but I'll repeat it. I think she said it last time. She didn't. She said it recently. And that is, the reason bad things happen to good people is that bad things come from bad thoughts. If you think bad, we can be the best person, but if we have bad thoughts, I guarantee you, she does too. Bad stuff is going to happen.
I'm in there.
Now, there is when we get to this idea of the whole and of oneness, we really have to deal with some oppositions. And oppositions are just a matter of the course of life. And one of the things to begin to reduce opposition, a very simple exercise that I find works, and I'm not the only one because I didn't come up with it, and that is when you have someone who is opposing your opinion or you're having an altercation with, the first thing you should say to diffuse the situation is look at them, you could be right. That begins to diffuse the situation. And then to make that person, if it is possible, into a partner of yours, into a friend of yours. Now most times when we say we're right and the other person's, we think the other person's wrong, we want to defend our position. And all that does is it steepens the wall and it makes it impossible to sort of bridge the gap. But if we can say, you could be right, I'll consider that, I'll think about that, the person begins to feel good. And if you want to go a step further, say, this opinion you have, I haven't completely gotten my mind around it, but I really want to get your advice on and your ideas on what I could do to support that, or what you can tell me more about that. Then the person really feels welcomed and you have more of a partnership. And that's a way of making a person your friend, so to speak, helping the situation rather than stiffening the wall and making it more difficult. Jesus says something pretty similar, but he doesn't necessarily go about it in that way. He says, turn the other cheek. We've all heard that expression. And that an enemy, and basically what it means is that an enemy can only remain your enemy if we give them the power to remain our enemy by hating them. So if we hate someone, then they got all the power that they need. But if you just don't hate someone, you just find a way to love them, to sort of agree with them, to sort of let them be whatever they are, and maybe find ways to ask them to support you, then the situation is diffused. And then Jesus gives us another great teaching known as the triple commandment or the love commandment. And if someone really tries to meditate on that and follow that, there won't be any disagreement or any opposition. Love God with all your heart, all your soul, and all your might, and love your neighbor as yourself. We can do that, and just remember to do that. We're going to diffuse opposition every time. Now, there's some ways to resolve so-called unresolved conflicts. Even when conflicts are so stiff that it just seems that there's no resolution, there is a spiritual solution. There's always a spiritual solution. Now, sometimes it seems impossible, especially in the political realm. We have a situation worldwide where we know there's climate change, we know there's a lot of stuff going on with various disasters that's going to ruin the planet for everybody if we don't do something about it. Well, there's a whole other group of people that says, none of that's true. It's just not true. And so what do? You have a lot of scientists, a lot of people saying, we need to take care of our planet. Other people saying, we need to make money, we need to take care of this. Let's not worry about that. Things come and go, storms come and go, it's not a big deal. Well, that's a pretty big clash. It's a pretty big difference. So how do we resolve that? Well, one of the first things is to recognize or try to realize, where did I get my beliefs from? Those people who believe that there's nothing to it, where did that come from? Those who believe that we need to participate in correcting the world and healing the world, where did they get those beliefs? So we need to kind of look at where our beliefs come from and to start thinking for ourselves as opposed to just going along with the mob, so to speak. Now, sometimes people say, I've never been good at this, but I've done it before, but it's just not a fun thing to do. And you've heard it said many times, agree to disagree. Mm-hmm. Well, you can say the words agree to disagree, but in your head it's like, it's a whole other thing. Okay, now one of the best things, and this is a practice that's kind of new to our philosophy, but it absolutely works in terms of resolving unresolved conflicts, and that is the process of visioning. What that does is it allows us to transcend the little box that we live in, and two people who disagree are both willing to honestly do visioning and honestly meditate and let themselves step out of their box, out of their perimeter. They're going to be in the same reality. But the reason we have so much conflict is that people are in the box and they just sort of stay there, and it's difficult to get beyond. Even prayer and visioning together will allow us to transcend situations. Now, I like a quote by Deepak Chopra that I think he stole from Terry Cole Whitaker, but he did enhance it, so I give him credit. And what he says, which is pretty profound, every now and then I'll mention this to my significant other, Sheila, and she says, that's right, I need to remember that. But she often forgets. I'm sure all of us forget. Here's what he says. What other people think of you is none of your business. That's the Terry Cole Whitaker problem. He says, if you make it your business, you're going to be miserable. Okay, so that's true. Because sometimes we're on and on about what other people think of us, but if we embrace that, it's going to make us miserable. Now, belief and confidence has a lot to do with how we can heal the planet, how we can heal each other, how we can bring oneness back into our lives. But a lot of it deals with, or the nexus of it, is what we believe and how confident we are in belief. So what's needed to heal ourselves and to heal another person, I like to think of it, it's important for the healer and it's important for the healee. I kept wondering why I came up wrong on my word thing. I said there's no word called healing, but I use the word healing. So there's a healer and a healing. But both of them have to have a level of belief and confidence. If the person doing the healing really is confident and has a belief, but the person receiving it just thinks it's a bunch of hogwash, they're kind of wasting their time. So it really has to be a two-way street. Now, I want to share two little short stories from clients that I think illustrate this point in kind of a big way. One is an individual who had limited belief and limited confidence. They kind of believed in me, sort of, but the idea of believing in the universe or believing in the subconscious mind, they didn't deal with that as much, but they tend to believe me. Anyway, this person had a visitor, and this guy was in town for about a week, and they just had a grand time in Marin County. And the fellow left, went back to Montana, and she was just determined to get back with this guy. And so over a period of about 6 months, she did a reading and wanted to know what could she expect if she just got in her car and went to Montana to meet this guy. Unexpectedly, surprised. Bad business. Reading said, no, don't do that. Second reading, don't do that. Third reading, don't do that. And she waited a few more weeks, almost a month, had a fourth reading, and the reading, and it still said don't do it. Then she waited even longer, the fifth reading, and I said, I hate to even take money for something like that. I mean, why is she calling me? But I said, well, maybe things change. And that's the way she put it. Maybe he's changed now. Maybe it's okay now. So the fifth reading said, go for it. You're going to have a good time. She hopped in her car, drove all the way to Montana. Turns out the guy was married. He didn't want anything to do with her.
Oh my God. Oh my God.
Why? And the question to me is, why did the universe tell me to go there? I said, they're trying to tell you not to do it, but after so many times, it figures you have to learn on your own, so that's why. Said, oh, okay. So that's sometimes when we just don't hear the message, we end up doing something bad just because it's the only way the universe can get through to us. Now, there's one client who has great belief, totally the opposite. And she's kind of she's actually a psychologist. And her belief and confidence, to me, is so great that she does what's been called blind reading scientifically. Let me explain what a blind reading is or what a blind study is. If I give you 2 cups of coffee, and I say, this cup of coffee is from Starbucks, and this cup of coffee is from Pete's, tell me what the difference in taste is. Well, based on your knowledge of Pete's or your knowledge of Starbucks, it's going to bias your opinion. If I give you 2 cups of coffee and I don't tell you who they came from, and I say taste it, maybe if you're a Pete's person, you really love Starbucks, or vice versa. So blind studies, when you just don't have information, you don't have the story, all you have was the answer yes or no. What is the answer? Without really knowing what the question is. So what this person does is gives me a list of questions, numbered 1 through 10 or 1 through whatever the number is. Once it came up to 60 questions one time, or A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And she says, I'm not going to tell you what the issue is, because I know whatever the answer is going to be correct. Just give me the answer to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So most clients, almost all of them, want to tell me the story. Sometimes I say, I got enough story. If you tell me any more story, I can't be fair. I'm going to be biased because I'm going to be ruined. So in her case, she doesn't tell me any stories. This has been going on for a long time. Just gives me the numbers and just says answer number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. And she trusts it, and it must be true because she's been coming back since the 1980s. So
Wow.
it's amazing how it works out that way. Now, let me tell a little, just to mix up a little humor in here, and then I'll get back to my talking. I'm halfway through, a little more than halfway. And this is a story about a client who went to see his psychiatrist. So he says when he showed up, the new patient was settled comfortably into the couch, and the psychiatrist began the therapy session. And he says, as a new patient with me, I apologize that I don't have your records and I haven't had a chance to review your case. I'm not really aware of your problem, so perhaps you could start from the very beginning and just tell me what's going on with you. Oh, sure, of course. And then the client replied, in the beginning, I created the heavens and the earth. Okay. Now, continuing on. So it's important when we have beliefs and confidence to get beyond collective beliefs. A lot of us have beliefs that were inherited from parents, from friends, from the collective. And one big belief that we all suffer from, many people suffer from, and those that don't suffer from it now used to suffer from it, and that is that there isn't enough, or that we're not enough, that there's not enough to go around. We have limited resources. So how do we move back past this collective belief? And one of the things we have to do is to learn how to release hypnotic spells. Hypnotic spells given to us from others. Some people say spiritualists or people into so-called psychic things or occult things are the ones who put spells on you. And I'd say, well, that's true. They're not the only ones. We all put spells on everybody. Some parents do that with their kids by telling them how bad they are. Or other people do it by just arranging people in such a way that it puts them down, makes them feel bad. So spells can be put on by anybody by just the words that they use. Sometimes music can give us a good spell. It's possible that music can give us a very sad spell. So some songs are very, very sad and brings tears to our eyes just to listen to them, kind of thing. So just being aware of that we are under spells, we need to begin to release hypnotic spells. Now we can do that through self-hypnosis. Self-hypnosis is like affirmations, it's prayer. Even visioning is a form of that. Now it turns out that if we can just recall the core principles, specifically core principles 5, 6, and 7. The fifth principle is wholeness, that we live in a universe of wholeness. Everything is whole. Yes, there's a front, yes, there's a back, but that's the fifth core principle. Just having a memory of that, having your mind steeped in the nature of wholeness is the beginning of dispelling negative beliefs or beliefs that there's not enough. The sixth core principle is abundance, that we live in a universe that's infinitely abundant. There's no limit. There's only infinite potential for those who want it. Instead of finite potential, there's infinite potential. And there's more than enough. And the seventh principle is reciprocity, pretty much cause and effect. What we put out is what we get back. So if we put out good thoughts and thoughts of abundance and thoughts of wholeness, that's what we'll get back. Now there's another quote from 360 Science of Mind that is pertaining to attaining happiness, and I'm going to read that and give you some tips on that. And it says as follows, or the song says as follows: it is only as you live affirmatively that you can be happy. Only if you live affirmatively can you be happy. You are united with all. You are one with the eternal light itself. The presence of the Spirit within you blesses everyone you meet, tends to heal everything you touch, and brings gladness into the lives of everyone you come in contact with. Now, Richard Gere, who's a Buddhist, has a wonderful affirmation he says every time he meets a situation or a person when he's going to it, even before he gets there. And it's very simple. And it's a good practice. I try to do it, but I often forget it, but it's a good practice. And he simply says, I wish you happiness. It's not too different from what the Pope says. If you don't know how to pray, just wish me well. But that's what Richard Gere said. He's been doing that for years, and it seems to work a lot. I wish you happiness, whatever the situation is. So it's a way of if you want to attract happiness, wish everyone else happiness. It turns out that happiness is a good thing. Everybody wants it, but it's not to knock it in any way. But happiness usually comes from attainment of a goal, reaching something you wanted, and once you reach it, you're happy. But then if you get the big car, you get the big house, or you win the race, or you do whatever with the revolution, you're happy, but then that happiness is a little bit temporary. If you're content, then you're happy for no reason. You're just happy because you're happy. You don't even know why you're happy. You're just smiling because that's your nature. And so one of the ways the rubber meets the road is starting and keeping happy relationships. And there's recurring visions that I've seen over the years. It just seems to, it's two of them that just come back again and again on when people say, what can I do? What guidance can I follow to make this relationship better? Or this some individual I just met, what can I do? And this is the common, there's two common visions that come up. Very simply, one is you need to be willing to hold the ladder for the other person that you care about or that you're wondering about. Hold the ladder simply means to be supportive. They have to do the work, but you're going to be the yes person. Yes this, yes that. If you can do that, that's going to really make your relationship happy. Secondly, is to be willing to follow the other individual. Not like 2 miles behind, but a few steps behind. What's the wisdom of that? The wisdom of that is that if you can let the other person, someone new in your life, even someone who's been around, to kind of take the lead, you can be in a position like a lot of animals are, seeing where they're going, seeing where, giving them more rope. Hopefully they're going in a good position, but if you're following someone and they're going in a bad way, then you have to say, I'm going to see you later. Okay. But if you're out in the lead trying to get your way, you won't see that. It'll just be one clash after another. So being willing to follow the other individual, and because if you can follow someone and you like the direction they're leading, you got a perfect relationship. They're happy, you're happy. But if you're out, come on, I want you to do this, I want you to do that. Well, there's only so much that you're not even listening in that sense. Okay, now I want to bring this to a close with talking about a little bit about listening to your intuition and feeling your emotions. Sometimes when this comes up, they're both kind of, one blends into the other, but we have this situation where am I listening to am I feeling my emotions, or am I listening to my intuition in terms of making a certain decision? It's a mind-body kind of dynamic. And one of my teachers from way back, Howard Thurman, actually, and one of his teaching styles was to raise a question without giving an answer. He just put the question out there and kind of leave it. And one of his questions was, if you have to choose between how I think and how I feel, how do you choose? You just leave it there, because the answer could be different depending on who's answering the question. If you have to think between how I think and how I feel, how do you choose? Well, let me give a couple of examples that might stir up the answer just a little bit. So if you're on a high-rise building, not you, but if someone's on a high-rise building and they're standing on a ledge and they're contemplating jumping, and they say, well, let me ask God if I should jump or not. Are they coming from feeling, or are they coming from thinking? Should they jump or should they not jump? Should they leave it to God? I would say don't tempt God like that. God might say, just go ahead and jump. If you feel that way, if you haven't made up your mind, just go ahead and jump. So that's a bad feeling might lead a person to the ledge, but that doesn't mean they should just go with the bad feeling. Now, one of the worst things you can do, and not one of the worst things, but it's not good to do, and that is to do visioning in a bad mood. If you're angry with someone, you're depressed, you're in pain, to do visioning just doesn't make sense. If I'm nailing something to the wall and I miss the nail and hit my thumb, I'm not in any state to do visioning. Oh dear God. It's just because I'm in a different place. So depending on your mood, visioning may or may not work. In fact, sometimes when you just hear a situation, you may get so riled up you can't even pray for it right then. And that's why Jesus has this saying where he says, take care of your business before you come to the altar. Don't just come to the altar anytime you want. And then the third one, finally, is the idea of you're walking down the street. This could be anyone. And you happen to see a $100 bill just sitting on the road. Do you pick it up? Or do you say, dear God, should I pick it up? Well, which one is the best? Most people are going to do what? Take it up. Take the money and run. Or take the money and walk. Now, is that God speaking? Or maybe you should look at the houses around, knock on some doors, just you leave a $100 bill. But most people would just say, my feelings said pick it up. This kind of thing. So it's an interesting kind of dilemma. In some cases, you don't need to ask direct permission from God. You just go on instinct, go on emotions. And they kind of blend together one into another, so they're not totally distinct. So hopefully you have a sense from this of what I set out to do, and that is to get a sense of oneness and what tends to keep us from it and what tends to bring us close to it. So with that, I'm going to conclude and invite you to join me on the